They say marriage is for better or worse. But what happens when the worst reveals someone you never truly knew? That's the question I've been asking myself every night since my world fell apart. And it all started the day I lost my job. Before everything unraveled, my life was ordinary, but it was good. I woke up at 6 a.m. every day, kissed my wife before heading to work, and came home to her smiling face and the smell of dinner on the stove. We had a routine, a rhythm, one that made me feel like we were building something solid together. My job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and more importantly, it gave us stability. We had plans, traveling to places we'd only seen in magazines, starting a family, and maybe even buying that house with the white picket fence someday. For the first time in years, I believed the future was bright. She believed it too, or at least that's what I thought. Then came the day that shattered it all. I remember sitting across from my boss in his office. His voice was calm as he told me the company had to make cuts. "It's nothing personal," he said, but it felt deeply personal. It wasn't just a job I lost that day, it was my identity, my confidence, and as I'd soon learn, my wife's respect. At first, she seemed understanding. She told me, "We'll get through this. I'm here for you," but words can be hollow, and actions don't lie. The warmth in her voice faded faster than I expected. It started with little things, her sighs when I mentioned job applications, and the way she avoided eye contact when I talked about interviews that went nowhere. Then came the comments. "Maybe you're just not trying hard enough. Are you seriously sitting around all day?" The word stung, but I told myself she was just frustrated. I mean, I was frustrated too. But as weeks turned into months, her tone sharpened. She'd come home late without explanation, toss her coat onto the chair, and barely acknowledge me. When I tried to help around the house, she'd sneer, "Do you really think folding laundry makes up for everything else?" I told myself it was temporary, that stress was bringing out the worst in both of us. Looking back now, I realize I was lying to myself. Love can make you do that. Cling to hope even when the cracks are too wide to ignore. I thought I could endure it, push through for the sake of the vows we made. But the truth? I was wrong. Dead wrong. Because sometimes, love isn't enough. And what happened next proved that in ways I never saw coming. She started staying out late, far later than she ever used to. It began with a few work outings she claimed were mandatory. But soon, her explanations became vaguer. A friend's birthday, an office party, a quick drink with the girls. The quick drinks turned into hours, and some nights, she wouldn't come home until after midnight. Then there was the way she dressed. She used to have a balanced wardrobe, smart and classy. But now, her closet was filled with tight dresses, plunging necklines, and heels higher than anything I'd seen her wear before. When I asked about the change, she laughed it off, saying, "I just want to feel good about myself." I wanted to support her, so I dropped it. But deep down, something didn't sit right. The real cracks showed in the small, troubling signs I couldn't ignore. I'd catch her quickly, locking her phone when I entered the room. Once, I noticed a faint, unfamiliar cologne lingering on her clothes when she hugged me after coming home late. It wasn't mine. I convinced myself that I was overly sensitive because of my insecurities about unemployment. But one evening, I accidentally saw a text pop up on her phone while it was charging. It wasn't explicit, but it felt off. "When next would you be free for a hangout?" My stomach churned as I read those words. When I confronted her about it, she barely looked up from her makeup mirror. "You're reading too much into things," she said, her tone dismissive. "That's just a friend. You really need to stop being so paranoid." I pressed further, asking why she was locking her phone all the time. That's when she turned to face me, her expression colder than I'd ever seen. "Paranoid and insecure. That's what you've become," she snapped. "If you were half the man you used to be, maybe I wouldn't have to find fun elsewhere." Her words hit like a sledgehammer. I felt the air leave my chest as if she'd physically punched me. There was no denial, no apology, just a blatant dismissal of my pain. I stared at her, searching for even a hint of regret, but she just turned back to the mirror, as if the conversation wasn't worth her time. That night, something inside me changed. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was a quiet, unsettling clarity. I realized I was holding on to someone who didn't care if she hurt me. And worse, I had allowed myself to be treated this way. I didn't say anything else. I just stood there frozen as she hummed to herself, oblivious to the pieces of my heart scattered across the room. It was New Year's Eve, a night that used to mean something to us. I sat alone in the dimly lit living room. The clock ticked relentlessly toward midnight, but the house felt cold. I had hoped, foolishly, that she'd come home early. Maybe we could share a quiet moment like we used to. I even set out 2 glasses and a bottle of wine, thinking we might toast to a better year ahead. The hours crawled by, and the hope I'd clung to faded with every passing minute. Memories of happier times played in my mind like an old film reel. Our first New Year's together, the laughter, the kisses at midnight. Back then it felt like we were partners, a team. But tonight I sat alone, the silence around me mocking the man I'd become. It was past midnight when I finally heard the sound of the front door creaking open. I turned, my heart a strange mix of relief and dread. There she was, stumbling into the house, her heels in one hand and her purse in the other. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smeared, and she reeked of alcohol. She laughed, a loud, careless laugh. It wasn't the laughter of someone who cared about the man waiting at home. No, it was the laughter of someone who had completely forgotten he even existed. And then I saw it. The faint mark on her neck was barely visible in the soft glow of the hallway light. A Hickey. It wasn't just a mark. It was a physical demonstration of how little she valued me, a cruel reminder of everything I'd lost. I stared at it. She didn't even try to hide it. Instead, she laughed again, tossed her purse onto the couch, and muttered something about being exhausted. She didn't even look at me. At that moment, something inside me broke. Not in anger, but in quiet resignation. I realized then that I wasn't her husband anymore, not really. I was just a placeholder in her life, a shadow she'd outgrown. My love, my loyalty, my sacrifices, they meant nothing to her now. I was no longer the man she leaned on, the man she respected. I was just there. I didn't say a word. There was no point. Confronting her would only lead to another fight, another round of excuses and deflections. So, I got up, walked to the bedroom, and started packing. I didn't take much, just a bag with a few clothes and the little cash I had saved. I left behind the life we'd built together, the home we'd once dreamed of filling with memories. All of it felt meaningless now. As I walked past her, slumped on the couch, fast asleep, I paused for a moment. I looked at her not with anger, but with a deep, aching sadness. This wasn't the woman I fell in love with. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. And maybe I thought I was to blame for some of it. But whatever the reason, I knew I couldn't stay. I opened the door, stepped out into the cold night, and didn't look back. But I didn't want to leave any loose ends. I needed to disappear completely, not just walk out the door. So, I started erasing myself from our life. The first thing I did was take control of our finances. She used to call me lazy, but it turns out I wasn't too lazy to keep track of every penny we shared. Before I left, I transferred the balance from our joint account into a personal account I'd opened months ago, an account she didn't know existed. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start fresh. Then I called the bank and closed the joint account entirely. No more shared resources, no more connections. It wasn't revenge, it was survival. Next, I turned my attention to our digital lives. Social media had been her playground, a place where she pretended to be someone else while mocking me behind my back. I logged into my accounts and deleted them all: Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I wanted no digital footprint, no breadcrumbs for her to follow. It was surprisingly easy to vanish online. A few clicks and I was gone, like I'd never existed. If she searched for me later, all she'd find was an empty void. Disappearing isn't just about leaving, it's about staying gone. I needed somewhere far from the life we'd built together, somewhere she'd never think to look. I chose a small town a few states away, the kind of place you'd only find if you were looking for it. I rented a tiny apartment under a new name, paid for with cash to keep things clean. The apartment was nothing special, just a bed, a table, and a stove. But to me, it was freedom. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't leave a note or an explanation. What would I even say? That I'd had enough? That her laughter at my pain was the final straw? Words felt meaningless after everything she'd done. So, I left nothing behind, just an empty closet and silence. As I drove away that night, the city lights faded in my rearview mirror. I was leaving a part of myself behind, but it wasn't her betrayal that weighed me down. It was the man I'd become. I didn't recognize the person I saw in the mirror anymore. I was weak, helpless, broken. By leaving, I wasn't only walking away from her. I was walking away from the version of myself who had allowed this to happen. I wasn't sure who I'd become next, but I knew I couldn't find him while staying in that house in that life. The road stretched ahead of me, dark and uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something new, a flicker of hope. I found out afterward that she didn't take my absence seriously first. My ex-wife-to-be was a creature of pride, always certain the world revolved around her whims. So, when she woke up the next morning and noticed my side of the closet was empty, she must have thought it was a stunt, a momentary tantrum I'd regret once I calmed down. She probably laughed, assuming I'd return in a day or two, tail between my legs, ready to grovel. But days turned into a week. And then, too, her calls started flooding in almost immediately. At first, it was just her number. Then it was our friends. Then her mother. Each one went straight to voicemail. I didn't need to listen to know what they said, variations of "where are you?" and "come home now." After about 2 weeks, the calls stopped being calm. I could tell by the frequency of her attempts that panic was setting in. She hadn't heard a word from me. No text, no email, not even a smoke signal. For a woman who always had control, the silence must have been deafening. That's when the search began. I can picture her scrolling through contacts. She would have called my closest friends first. That's what most people do in these situations. She'd ask if they'd seen me, trying to sound casual, maybe even charming. But I know her temper. When they said no, I'm sure it quickly turned to frustration. Her frustration eventually turned into desperation. I can imagine her walking into the police station, putting on her best performance as the concerned wife. "Officer, my husband is missing," she'd say, probably forcing a tear or two for effect. "He's been gone for weeks. He left without saying anything, and I'm so worried." But the thing about disappearing when you're an adult is that as long as there's no crime involved, it's not illegal. Adults have the right to leave if they choose. The police would have filed a report, sure, but I knew they wouldn't waste resources on a man who simply decided to vanish. The breaking point must have come when she finally checked the joint accounts. I'd been meticulous in my planning, withdrawing every penny I could before I left. That money wasn't hers to spend, not after the way she treated me. She must have stared at the empty balance in disbelief, refreshing the page over and over, hoping it was a glitch. It wasn't. It had been over a year since I walked out of that house, leaving behind the shattered pieces of our marriage. And now, I wished to end things. I could only imagine her expression when she received the envelope, a thick stack of papers with my name scrawled neatly on the return address. She must have convinced herself I was never coming back. The papers weren't just legal documents. They were my final goodbye, the closing of a chapter one once thought would last forever. The message was clear. Our marriage was over. Along with the divorce agreement, I had included a handwritten note. It was brief, but it said everything I needed her to hear. My handwriting wasn't as steady as it used to be, but every word carried weight. The note read, "I spent months wondering why I wasn't enough for you, Why my love and dedication weren't enough to make you stay faithful, to make you respect me. Losing my job was hard, but losing the person I thought I could trust with my worst moments? That nearly broke me. But your betrayal didn't destroy me. It freed me. It made me realize that I was clinging to someone who didn't deserve my loyalty. I've spent this past year rebuilding myself, piece by piece, and I've finally found peace. I don't need an apology or closure from you. I've made my own. You once laughed at my pain. I hope you find joy in the life you've chosen. I remember the day she finally reached out after receiving the divorce papers. Her voice trembled over the phone, filled with an urgency I hadn't heard in years. "We can work this out," she said. "We can fix this. I'll change." But it was too late. She didn't sound like the woman I had loved, and frankly, I wasn't the same man anymore either. I listened quietly, letting her pour out her words, and when she was done, I calmly said, "I've already moved on." She cried, and for a moment I felt sorry for her. Not angry, not vengeful, just sorry that she had thrown away what we had. But even that sympathy faded quickly. I already found a modest but steady job at a small logistics company. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me purpose. I woke up every morning with a sense of pride, knowing that I was earning my way back to stability. I won't lie, the nights were hard at first. Loneliness has a way of creeping in when you least expect it, whispering doubts and regrets into your ear. But over time, the silence stopped feeling heavy. It became peaceful. I realized I was learning how to enjoy my own company, something I hadn't done in years. When I told her I wasn't interested in working things out, she accused me of being cruel and of giving up too easily. But I didn't argue. I simply told her the truth. I deserve better. And so do you? I didn't hang up on her or yell or let bitterness win. I just ended the call with a quiet goodbye. It felt like closing a chapter in a book I'd outgrown. Now, months later, I can honestly say I'm happier than I ever thought I could be. It's not the life I once imagined for myself, but it's mine, and it's enough. I've built a new foundation, brick by brick, and with every step forward, I feel lighter. I thought I couldn't survive without her. Turns out, losing her was the best thing that ever happened to me.